I'd like to welcome Arnold Tawby. So let's give him a warm Pachyderm Club welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to have an opportunity to go and speak with your group about a subject that I love, which is history and aviation, about Erwin Bleckley and the restoration project of a DH4 that will end up being virtually identical to the one that he last flew in before he died. It's usually a good idea to start out a presentation with a joke or some kind of funny story. And I looked through the internet and tried to find some World War I soldier humor or flyboy humor. And I couldn't find anything that was really suitable. But I do have a family story. And that the first birthright citizen of the Taubes in the USA was my father's uncle Henry. And he became a doughboy in World War I. And when he was over there, occasionally on leave from the front, in the Alsace-Lorraine area, they would go in and find a place, a restaurant or a guest house that still had a restaurant and a bar and the guys would go, "Hey, Henry, come over here and parlez-vous these Frenchies for us." And what his friends didn't know was Henry didn't know any French. He was talking German to him. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about Erwin Bleckley and the story of the Lost Battalion and the Medal of Honor mission for Harold Gottlieb, the pilot, and Erwin Bleckley, who was the observer gunner, and the aftermath of that mission and of the Lost Battalion. We're going to talk and give you some update on the progress of the DH4 restoration and our activities for community service and our plans for a memorial at Eisenhower Airport, and then a call to action at the end. Our fundamental mission statement is that we're going out to honor Wichita's highest honored aviation hero, and that of Erwin Bleckley, who was a second lieutenant at the time. He and his pilot won the congressional, or were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for their actions. And they definitely have a story that is worthy of being remembered and inspired. Erwin Bleckley, and that was born on December 30th, 1894. His father was Elmer Ellsworth Bleckley. His mother was Margaret Little Bleckley. They lived at 609 North St. Francis Avenue. Erwin graduated from Wichita High School in 1913, and afterwards he went to work at the Fourth National Bank of Wichita, where his father also worked and was, I believe, an officer. Surprisingly, we're in the air standing over where the Fourth National Bank used to be. I was really shocked to go and find out that I was going to be presenting today in virtually the same location of where Erwin worked. The Lost Battalion was about 693, just short of 700 men from the 77th Division, or the New York Division, and that their participation in the Meuse-Argonne offensive started on October 2nd, 1918. The whole overall offensive started, I believe, around my birthday, September 26th. And that when they started out for their offensive on October 7th, the soldiers were carrying 2 days' worth of supplies, and that basically food and ammunition and water. And they achieved their objective, which was the Charlot Ravine, or pocket, and they're there, but they noticed that the French, who were on their left flank, didn't make it, and same thing, they weren't hearing anything happening on their right side, on the right flank, and so they went and secured where they were at, because they were under orders to not retreat unless ordered by their superior officers for the division, which was the general, so they dug in, and because their right flank and left flank didn't make their objectives, and that they ended up getting surrounded by the Germans, and so they were basically under siege for 6 days, and that they weren't actually lost. They knew where they were, and the U.S. Army knew roughly where they were supposed to be, but because they were roughly the number of people in a battalion, a newspaper publisher picked up the idea that they were the lost battalion, and possibly their general had said, well, those troops are lost to me right now, and so the story of the lost battalion grew out of that. The battalion basically had to brave assaults by flamethrowers, mortars, small arms, machine gun, sniper fire, and they also had an assault by German stormtroopers, which were the guys that the German army used to go and try and crack the defensive lines when they tried to attack. So they were tough and they were armored. And they also at one point were attacked by the friendly artillery. The U.S. Army artillery tried to support them, but because they weren't exactly where they thought they were or where they were supposed to be, and the only way to communicate back to them was either by a runner, which the Germans pretty well sealed them off, and runners were rarely able to get through. They had to rely on carrier pigeons. And indeed, their last carrier pigeon, Cher Ami, was used to call off the artillery barrage that was landing right on the lost battalion. Okay, so Erwin Bleckley and his group, he was an artillery observer who got assigned to be an observer in aircraft once he made it over to Europe. And when he was in the 50th Aero Squadron on October 5th, and they were given the mission to go, the whole squadron, to go and try and provide supplies and locate exactly where the lost battalion was so they could be provided with artillery support. On the first mission, or on October 5th, they actually didn't get to fly, and the weather kept them down. But on October 6th, they did, and they sent out 13 sorties that day, 11 of which were in the morning, and which Erwin Bleckley and his pilot Harold Gottler participated in. And two of the aircraft on the sorties got shot down, but all their air crews survived. And Bleckley's aircraft had 40 bullet holes in it when it came back, and it was sufficiently damaged in that it was rendered or declared not flyable. So on the Medal of Honor mission, Bleckley and Guttler volunteered to go and fly another mission later in the day, late in the afternoon, about 6 p.m. or thereabouts. And their first pass up the valley, they were basically operating on the principle of where we don't get shot at, that's where our guys are. And so on their first pass through the valley, they didn't get shot at by anybody, and they caught the Germans completely by surprise. They didn't think anybody was going to be flying that time of day. But as they came back in again and again, the Germans woke up and they started shooting at them. Harold Gottler got shot in the back of the head and died instantly. And the 5-point harnesses like they have in modern fighter aircraft or military aircraft didn't exist back then. All they had was basically a big, heavy seatbelt. So when Gottler got hit and he got pitched forward and slumped, Bleckley had a control stick and rudder pedals so he indeed could try and fly the aircraft. And we don't know how much training he actually had in flying the aircraft, probably not very much. But as Gottler slumped forward, he fell on the stick, which made life even more difficult for Bleckley to go and try and fly the aircraft. He ended up making it about 2 miles out of the forest and ended up crash landing, and actually is more of a crash than a landing. It was bad enough that he got thrown out of the aircraft, but Bleckley ended up dying of his injuries as a result of that crash landing. The Lost Battalion got partially relieved on October 7th, where a company of additional soldiers were able to basically sneak in past the Germans, and the Germans were getting ready to go and depart at that point. So that's another part of the reason why that additional company of soldiers were able to get in on October 7th. But on October 8th, they were fully relieved. The Germans had retreated back towards the Hindenburg line. And out of the 693 soldiers that started out on the offensive on October 2nd, and at 194 were able to walk out. And so that was like about a 70% loss of combat capability of the battalion as a result of that. And it's probably the most well-known large unit story from the U.S. Army during World War I. And an ambulance driver who was a U.S. volunteer for the French, and saw the whole thing on October 6th, and he later said that he considered that was the greatest act of bravery that he had ever seen. And Bleckley is Wichita's only Medal of Honor winner, and that flight was the only flight during the First World War where 2 Medal of Honors were awarded for the same mission. And they're in pretty good company, because if you ever heard of Frank Luke, the balloon buster, he got a Congressional Medal of Honor, and Bleckley's Medal of Honor was upgraded from the Silver Star up to the Medal of Honor in 1922. And Eddie Rickenbacker, who is the other, the ace of aces from World War I for the U.S., and is the 4th Medal of Honor, and his wasn't awarded until 1930. In 1932, Bleckley Drive, and that was renamed to that title, and it's actually reasonably close. It's just a little on the east side of 135 and a little north of Kellogg, and it's basically 2 blocks east of Oliver Street, and there's a North Bleckley Drive and a South Bleckley Drive, and that's centered on Douglas Avenue as to where the switch is. So it's reasonably close. Okay, now Wichita is a DH4. The aircraft was built by a group in Bowling Green from original factory manufactured components. And it was taken to the EAA Air Venture in Oshkosh in 2018. That's the top photo that you see. And the Bowling Green group built the aircraft to be flyable, and they test flew it in 2020, and something went wrong with the pitch control of the aircraft, and so it pranged, and that's the bottom picture as to what the aircraft looked like after it hit the ground. And the pilot only got bruised, which was fortunate because he was a senior citizen, but needless to say, it needed to be fully rebuilt if it was going to be displayable or flyable again. And the group in Bowling Green didn't have the heart to go and do it again. And so that's how we were able to get it. And because of the tie to Erwin Bleckley and the Lost Battalion story and everything, there were parties, including the National Museum of the Air Force and a couple other parties that had much more money than we did. We got the aircraft. Okay, so the aircraft, and that was, the notes aren't showing me what all I need to get. Mike, where was the first location that we were set up that we did work in?
A hangar at NIAR, I believe, for a while, for WSU, and then they transferred it out to the airport after about a year. And then the hangar was sold out from underneath of us. so we had to move to our present location.
Okay. And the DH4 is one of only 4 DH4s left in the world, at least 4 US manufactured DH4s that are left in the world. And that it's basically, it's not a British built DH4, it's an American DH4 that was built by the Dayton Wright Airplane Company in Dayton, Ohio, and at least from components that were built there. And it will end up being restored to the exact markings that Bleckley had on, and Harold Gettler for their Medal of Honor mission. And even to the point of the serial number plate on the control panel, and that it's got the exact serial number of the aircraft that Bleckley and Gettler flew on their Medal of Honor mission. The FAA basically has allowed that to be done because the serial number and that hadn't been claimed by anybody else, and so it's going to be able, if it ever, it's going to be restored to a flyable state, and that as to whether we actually really fly it or not, that's an interesting question. Personally, I don't think we should ever go and try that, and it's too valuable. We are restoring it to flyable conditions, so that the FAA will go and be able to license it for being able to fly. And there's our 2 inspector authorization guys, and that guy on the brunette in the dark shirt or sweatshirt, and that is John Behrens, and Wayne Borman is the other IA. And there's the warehouse that the aircraft was stored in for about, I don't know, maybe 9 months, 6 months, when we had to vacate the first work site, and we were in storage at the Kansas Aviation Museum. There's pretty much the crew involved in that move. Our current work site, and this is photos taken at move-in, and you can see the fuselage there. It's basically owned by Steve Barrett of SRB Enterprises. He's also the part owner of B&C Barbecue and the arcade in the Old Town area. And so we are in the Old Town area, so it's a nice convenient spot to be able to go and see. If you're down for farmer's market or something like that during the summer, you can come in and see what we're doing. And the location is 359 North Mosley, and that we work basically on Mondays and Thursdays from 9 a.m. to roughly noon or a little later. And that dropping in unannounced is encouraged. And if those hours don't fit your schedule in that, and you want to see what makes up a wooden World War I combat aircraft, and that you can contact us and schedule a special time and day and that to be able to get a personal tour. This is another view of the other part of the large open area, and that currently on the far left of the picture, that's where we have a bunch of woodworking machine tools, and that located, and not shown in these photos is the tool room and the parts crib that we have in back, and we follow rigorous check-in, check-out procedures for getting our tools and for getting the parts. There's the rebuilt right side. And here we are. I'm not qualified or certified to do anything. I built a lot of flyable balsa wood and spruce and plywood model airplanes in my time, but I'm not really certified to do anything. So I stayed away from anything that could cause any harm. But I got to work on putting together the template, and that we're going to use for the real aviation rated plywood that was going to make up the fuselage or cover the fuselage side. We're finishing up the second wing, and we're even further along than this at the current time. We had to install all new formers in the front part of the aircraft, and as you can see, we've got formers there that go all the way up to almost where the engine is. We've put in new tensioning cross braces back in the fuselage, And here we are. We had to totally rebuild the landing gear, and so this is basically a dry fit of the parts for the landing gear and the sheet metal parts that we had machined and folded, if you can see the strings that are in there, that's basically where basically reinforcing wires are going to go and so we were doing that to make sure that nothing interferes and that everything lines up properly. There's the highest tech piece of equipment in the aircraft. That's the Liberty V12 engine. It developed 400 horsepower at 1800 RPM. It's 1,649 cubic inches. Comparable British and German engines were only developing 200 horsepower at that time frame. And it weighs 844 pounds dry, and it's liquid cooled. And believe it or not, the engine mounts on this thing are wood. They're oak. And that they do have metal tubes that go through them. But imagine having to hold reliably 400 horsepower on that thing with wood. We aim to complete the restoration sometime in 2026, and hopefully we're going to fit that. We are in process and partnering with the city of Wichita and lining up the city officials and that to enable us to get approval to go and put the aircraft into the Eisenhower passenger terminal. And we are working to educate the community on the very valuable story and values of Erwin Bleckley. There's a group of some of the high school kids that came through. And down below, you see that they're basically seeing how the structure is put together for the wing. We've been present at the McConnell Air Show last summer, and we've had a pretty impressive, extensive display there. We've also hosted the Carpenters Club. It's kind of a biggest cabinet building project you've ever seen. So carpenters, woodworkers love this thing. And we have open houses that we schedule up, and as I said, we encourage walk-in visitors, and not shown, we participated in the EAA fly-in last summer at the Jabara Airfield and the Veterans Day Parade, as well as participating in the event that they had on Veterans Day at the Exploration Place, and we built a traveling museum, which you're seeing there in the photographs, and there's our initial displays. What we have planned for it are actual full-blown museum quality displays with stories and text that tell you exactly what you're looking at and why it's important to the story. We're planning on being at Riverfest this year, and we're looking in the possibility of being at the Kansas State Fair with our traveling museum. We're willing to go to other schools and take it on site to their facility, so they don't need to necessarily come to our place. And that we're really out to go and educate both the community and students about the story of Erwin Bleckley. Our goal and plan for the aircraft is to have it be part of a memorial at the Wichita Eisenhower Airport, and that with the DH4 being a centerpiece of the display. The inspiration for this, if you've ever flown through O'Hare Terminal 2, and that there's a F4F-3 Wildcat that was what Butch O'Hare flew on his Medal of Honor mission during the Battle of Coral Sea, and that ditched in Lake Michigan during training activities on teaching people how to land on an aircraft carrier. And so it was hauled out, reconditioned, because -3 Wildcats are really rare. And it's an impressive display. If you ever go through Terminal 2, look it up. And that's in concept what we're out to go and do for Bleckley and Gettler. We do intend to have a life-size bronze statue of Bleckley included as part of the memorial, and that Babs Meller, and that local sculptor and well-renowned personality, and that is her group and team are putting that together. And the other lady in the picture is Angie Vermhoed, and she works with Babs, and she's probably going to be highly involved in the construction as well. Now, getting into the call for action, and that this isn't cheap, even though it's made out of wood, and that there's basically the cost of the power plant, and that we just recently got the 10 grand provided to the group in Oregon that basically are going to be taking the engine apart and seeing if there's any damage to it from that hard forced landing and that we had, and that so we had to provide 10 grand and that just for them to go and crack it open, and that so could go up to 35,000 or better if it needs to be rebuilt or anything repaired. There's the cost that we still have outgoing for the airframe. And there's for the expected expenses for the wings and the horizontal stabilizer. Basically, the amount of money we need to spend just on the aircraft is about $200,000. And the people that are involved in this, including myself, and that we've been contributing heavily to it, but we don't have enough financial resources to get it done. We need some people to help step up and donate and help us get this accomplished. There's basically our rent and utilities, and that, as well as doing marketing activities, keeping a website going, and so on. We're about ready to go and get that. Our website has been kind of stale, because we didn't really have the talent or the money to go and do it. I'm going to be picking up maintaining the website here shortly, hopefully. And then getting the actual memorial put together, and that's going to be quite expensive, and that the whole total of the memorial and restoring the aircraft, and that is probably going to be just a little shy of $1 million, and with inflation and that, I wouldn't be surprised if it goes over $1 million. And there is no plan B or plan C as to where to go and put the aircraft, and that it will go into the Eisenhower Airport, and we are going to not go away in that until we get that accomplished. So as far as helping us move forward and the call to action, cash donations, and that highly appreciated and needed. Donor referrals, much appreciated. If you've got talents and interest in marketing, communications, what have you, and that we probably got a spot for you. And that, as I said, we basically work on Mondays and Thursdays from 9 till noon, and that's work on site at the 359 North Mosley. And that, so there's our address. You can write it down, and that, look us up. And basically, Doug Jacobs and Greg Zerker were the people that probably presented a year ago, and that I added my contact information down there in the center. And with that, we are ready for questions.
Appreciate it. We'll have some questions for you. Got a little time left. So if you're a member, raise your hand high so we can start with questions. We got a couple, three.
After you get approval to place the completed plane at the airport terminal building, do you all have a preferred location out there where you would like to have it sitting?
Well, it's probably more where the space is going to be available as opposed to preferred location, and that we anticipate it being somewhere in the baggage or luggage claim area, in open space there.
Okay, another question?
Once you get the plane complete, before you take it to the airport, can you take it to Oshkosh to show it off?
Yeah, once it's in the airport, it's probably gonna stay. Beforehand, that is a possibility, and we actually are right now in discussions there's a group in Kentucky where the first U.S. military test pilot is from Kentucky and in the Frankfurt area, and they are about ready to dedicate a monument to that gentleman, and he was the first U.S. military person to ever fly a DH4. And so they're asking to see if we can get our aircraft in its current state and that to them for their celebration, and we're looking to see if we can pull that one off.
Okay, question here?
Two things. Was his body ever returned to the United States, or is he interred in France? And then secondly, what part of the restoration of what you have now is from the original? Is there anything, is that engine that you mentioned, is any of this original?
Okay, I have hearing aids, and I didn't fully hear what you asked. He is buried in France.
And the second question?
Is any of the current structure that you have and the plane you have now, is any of it original to him?
Okay, it is not original to Bleckley. That aircraft was after the crash was a total write-off. And in fact, it took the 50th Aero Squadron several days to maybe a week to go and find out exactly what happened to him and what the state was for Gettler and Bleckley. So no, it's other than having been built by Dayton Wright shortly after World War I, and before the armistice or right after, and that's the closest to actual Bleckley that you got, except we are going to paint it up to where it looks just like the last aircraft he was ever in.
Okay, any other questions for members? All right, here's Carl.
Well, I'll throw one out. Is there a chance that the Bleckley statue will be completed before the aircraft, or are they kind of operating on parallel, and will the Bleckley statue be shown prior to the aircraft restoration being complete?
I'm not informed on that one. Basically we probably are not making progress on the statue at the current time, and that due to financial reasons. But as far as when it's going to be done and the schedule, that I'm not informed on that yet.
Will the aircraft be hung from the ceiling, or will it be on the ground?
Hang on, we're coming.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep. I know we can hear you without it.
Thank you. Will the aircraft be hung from the ceiling out there, or will it be on the floor?
We'll take either location in all likelihood.
Okay, any other questions? Here we go.
Actually, I've got two questions for you. I'm a Packard enthusiast, and of course my first thought was, I was trying to look up on the internet, was that a Packard built L12 engine? Because it was probably America's single greatest contribution to aviation in that era.
Okay, I didn't try without the microphone. See if I can.
The engine that you have is, at least to a lot of folks, as important as the aircraft, because it is one of the single greatest contributions to America's aviation during the First World War. Now, the L-12 in yours, will it be operable? Is that your goal? Did I understand that correctly?
We are having the engine restored to where it is fully operational.
Well, you have one near where people could actually get up and see it? I mean, it's truly a remarkable, gigantic piece of equipment.
Well, if we have the space, that is a possibility, and that's definitely going to raise the price, because we'll have to get they're pretty scarce. We're going to have to find one that get it restored to displayable condition.
Well, I have a suggestion for you.
Now, I don't know if it's still there, but when I was visiting the National Air and Space Museum, they have one that is, I just looked it up, it's in their inventory but not on display. And they might be willing to loan you something like that. And the reason I ask is that in the aviation circles, the engines are something that America truly pioneered as a remarkable achievement. And this is the big one. And so thank you for going to the effort to save that. And I hope you'll put it in a place where people can really see it. Second question. You know the parking situation, especially for school buses and everything. If this is going to be an educational tool, is it possible to have it down where Doc is, where people could actually study it, read a library? Because baggage claim, as you know, is very transient, very quick, in and out.
Well, the intent to have it in the passenger terminal is you've got, I believe the pre-COVID figure was like around 2 million people passing through Eisenhower in a year, and that, so Doc has got a very nice facility, and I've been there. I love it. It's first rate, and that. But I don't think you get anywhere near 2 million people a year through that place.
Okay, question right here.
How much would a replica cost to make, so that you could use the replica in parades and things to advertise?
I haven't seen a price for a replica, and that there is a radio control 1/8 scale model that the kit costs, I believe it's $1,000, and that unassembled, and that, so something like that is a possibility. But again, we're at this time we're trying to hold expenses down, and that might be a someday.
Okay, any other questions, real quick?
Thank you all. Let's have a great
Okay,
weekend.
thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you.